Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by JockMKT, where daily fantasy sports becomes a stock exchange. You can download the JockMKT app in the App Store today. The Android app is coming soon. I'm Derek Van Riper here along with Jake Seeley and Brandon Funston, getting you ready for Week 10 of this fantasy football season. Michael Beller and Ed Mallion will join us shortly, and we'll have Tashan Reed of The Athletic joining us at noon Eastern today to discuss the Raiders. As always, we'll take your questions. Send those our way on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching this show on this fine Sunday morning. We'll get to those over the course of the next 90 minutes. Good morning, gentlemen. It's interesting that we're talking about weather again. It's only Week 10, but weather pretty bad around the league. So we're going to start there and talk about some of the impact that the terrible conditions are going to have in a few places. Looking at the weather report this morning from Kevin Roth of Roto Grinders, we see a Texans-Browns matchup in Cleveland with sustained 25-plus mile-per-hour winds, gusts up to 50. Similar conditions for Jags-Packers in Green Bay with the possibility of light snow and some flurries on top of that. Lovely. And some concerns also with the Bengals-Steelers matchup, maybe 20 to 30 mile-per-hour winds there with potential gusts up to 50 as well. Jake, you've run through your plans for how you adjust for weather in the past, but these are three legitimately bad situations that you really have to start accounting for. So we're talking about a lot of very key, relevant fantasy players, especially in those passing games, who are impacted by this.
Yeah, anything over 15-mile-an-hour wind is a slight concern. You downgrade, I mean, we're talking 5%, 10% at most of the passing game. When you start talking about 20, 25, you're talking about gusts getting anywhere over the 30s, and now you're still talking about a significant hit. We already saw this happen earlier with the Cleveland game, and we saw that game be miserable outside of their rushing opportunities. So I already put Baker Mayfield down, downgraded Ben Roethlisberger just a tad. I'm not that worried because Ben Roethlisberger, here's the flip side of it before I say it's not everybody, because on the flip side of it, you saw Green Bay and Devontae Adams in the same game earlier this year. He's still dominated because the low air yard per target guys can still work out. You still have opportunities to make plays after the catch, like the running game. Some of these situations actually favor those players, especially if you talk about snow or precipitation, because they know where they're going and the defenders struggle to get them. So, you know, the downside is, of course, you probably bench Marquise Brown, or maybe I wouldn't go as far as benching Will Fuller, but you drop him maybe down into a wide receiver 2-3 range instead of that fringy wide receiver 1 he's been. But some of these guys can take a 5-yard pass and then, as similar to a running back, go off for 40 yards. We were joking about this before the show. So there is the risk. It's whether or not you need to take it. Like, I'm not benching Will Fuller to go all the way down to, you know, somebody like Darius Slayton in a bad matchup. I'm not going that far. But these are things you have to factor in. Like Baker Mayfield, or the quarterback specifically, I have Baker Mayfield. I don't even know how you play him this week. I put him all the way down to about QB 20, and I had him about QB 15 this week already.
Yeah,
I mean, we saw Baker Mayfield in this situation not throw a touchdown pass and not look good last week, and you get Nick Chubb back. And Cleveland's MO, if they can run the ball, which they should be able to, they'll just hammer it, you know. And so you got Chubb back, you got Hunt back. You're probably talking 30+ overall touches for those two.
Yeah, and those two backs, with Chubb coming back, playing for the first time since Week 4, I mean, they can coexist in most matchups, just given how much the Browns want to run the ball. But where do you set the expectations for Chubb? I mean, you look at DFS prices, I think he's just under $7K on DraftKings. Do you think he easily gets close to his normal workload in his first game back, Brandon?
Well, his normal workload first 3 weeks was around 19 touches per game, and Kareem Hunt was at 15. I would guess maybe for this first game that they're a little closer to even in the split, and I think Nick Chubb will slowly kind of, you know, creep away from Hunt in terms of the overall split. But the first game back, I would expect to be close to even, but probably both landing in the 15 to 20 range.
Nice to see Chubb back out there, though. Definitely expecting to be busy as you are this week. Miles Sanders also coming back. First time we're going to see him since Week 6. Now, Jake, where do you set the expectations for Sanders? Because, you know, compared to having Kareem Hunt in the backfield in Cleveland, Boston Scott is a competent replacement, but he's not necessarily someone that you have to give the ball to when you have Miles Sanders healthy. So where do you project that workload for Sanders this week against the Giants?
I think he's right back into it, especially with the bye week. And he sounded potentially possible before the bye even showed up. So the fact that they kept him safe, they kept him in check, and then, you know, like, get by on top of it, and now you get the Giants. Giants been better against the run. Actually, it's mostly because that front is getting pressure into the backfield, whether it's the quarterback or the running back. But at the same time, it's not a worrisome matchup. I have Miles Sanders. I'd play him in front of Josh Jacobs against the Denver run defense. And the fact that the difference between the two is that Josh Jacobs is still not getting used in the passing game. He's week 1, and then that was it. And Miles Sanders, as you just mentioned, if he's out there, it's not like, oh, Boston Scott gets the passing game. Miles Sanders gets almost everything.
Yeah, as he should. He's just much better than anybody else in that backfield. Love the matchup against the Giants for his first game back as well. The DFS free square, as he's been called this week, is Mike Davis. He was priced like a backup. We found out early in the week that Christian McCaffrey wasn't going to go. It's a tough matchup. I mean, Tampa Bay's run defense is stingy, but you're just talking about 15 carries with ease. Even if he's inefficient, you're talking about probably 4 to 5 catches on top of that. It's 10 or 11 points in a full PPR league right there, and that's before the possibility of him finding the end zone. So it could be an ugly efficiency day for Mike Davis, but I think you have to turn to him both in season long and in DFS, given how low that price is. Is there any other way it can go wrong, Brandon? I mean, it just looks like he's really safe because we've seen so much of him filling in for McCaffrey this season and doing pretty well with that volume.
Well, yeah, Tampa can absolutely shut him down in the running game, and that could go wrong. But I feel like, he's kind of like a 40 rushing yard, 40 receiving yard, and maybe it's 6 catches. I mean, remember he had 8 catches against Tampa earlier this year. There's always that possibility. They throw to the running back so much. It's been Davis and McCaffrey, but whoever's been back there, they just, Teddy Bridgewater has no problem dumping that ball off. So that's why you're playing Mike Davis, because it feels like 5 catches is the floor, and it could be 10 catches. You never know. But I don't expect him to do a whole lot on the ground. Doesn't matter. He'll get volume, and that's what you're really going after here.
And we had a Mike Davis question that was popped up there just a second ago. We'll get that in just a moment. But I think in terms of volume, he's just a safe start in season long. I don't think you're really worried about him all that much. You're just not expecting as much from a yardage standpoint as you typically would. The question here from Alper.
Solid RB.
Is he a solid RB1 this week? Yeah.
It's
maybe
fringe.
a notch below, yeah.
We're in week 10, and 11, 12, and 13 for my rankings are Mike Davis, Giovanni Bernard, and Duke Johnson.
This has been a rough year, to say the least, if that's where things stand already here in week 10. Good news, though, Christian McCaffrey might return in week 11, so there's some hope if you are rostering him and have been disappointed by the fact that he's missing more time here in week 10. Let's talk about Ben Roethlisberger for a second. We talked about this game from a weather perspective, and the interest in Roethlisberger comes down a little bit anyway, but he was cleared to play, was on the COVID reserve list a little earlier this week. I think I've been wrong about the hierarchy in this Pittsburgh passing game at every possible turn this season. Factoring in the weather, sure, you're dialing back the expectations a little bit for this group as a whole this week, but Jake, how do you stack up the Pittsburgh receivers the rest of the way?
It's actually pretty easy. The problem is the number one is he's the fault. Is we know it's Deontay Johnson. If healthy, it's within a game. He can't get healthy throughout the game. So if we knew everybody was just going to be 100%, it would be Deontay Johnson. And I put Claypool second because of the upside, and the Juju Smith-Schuster has turned essentially into a slot option. If no Deontay Johnson, then it's Claypool and just Juju Smith-Schuster are both top 20 wide receivers. The problem is Deontay Johnson, he gets 10 plus targets when he's healthy, and then he's completely left out and a goose egg potentially when he's not. So we're not going to know game to game. I feel like if you're looking for the safest option at this point, you talk about Ben Roethlisberger, and it's not just this game, but as the season as a whole, this is his worst air yards per target of his career. Similar to Drew Brees, his arm is just not there anymore. And that's kind of created the resurgence of Juju Smith-Schuster because he has to turn to him a lot because he's not getting the ball downfield. So I think Claypool and Juju are the safest, but Deontay would be the highest if we just knew he was 100%.
And do you agree with that breakdown, Brandon?
Yeah, and I think the way I look at it is I feel like 2 of the 3 are going to do something for you every week, and you don't really know who it is, but you can't really bench him. You got to take those 66% odds, and the 1 week of the 3 that Deontay doesn't do anything is usually because he just has to leave the game early with some kind of ailment. But I don't think you just expect that 1 down week in 3 is what you're going to get if you keep plugging a Chase Claypool out there every week, or a Juju. Although I agree with Jake, Juju is starting to slowly show some consistency and just kind of be Ben's guy. Maybe it's because, like he says, he's going the way of Drew Brees and just dumping it down a little bit more.
29 targets the last 3 games for Juju Smith-Schuster. We got a question from Jason, who apparently did something to bother the weather gods at some point. Half-point PPR, which 3 He's got Cooks at Cleveland, Boyd at Pittsburgh, Deontay Johnson against the Bengals, Kirk against the Bills, DJ Chark against the Packers, or Adam Thielen in a tough matchup against the Bears. Even though it's a tough matchup for Thielen, I think he has to probably be locked in, despite the fact that there's good depth here. But what would you guys do with those other two spots? What do you think, Jake?
First, is this like an 8-team league? Like, why aren't you making trades, dude? Like, holy crap! This is you're creating this frustration on yourself. It's funny that we're also at that point of the season, DVR, where I got the why do I hate Adam Thielen when he's my 15th ranked wide receiver? Like, oh, that's so terrible. Why do I hate it? And Antonio Gibson at RB15. Throw it back up there, Nando. I'm trying to go through all the options. So Thielen. Yeah, it's a bad matchup with Thielen. There's also a little bit of weather in that game. It's kind of in that 15 range. So Thielen, Chark can do enough in the short game. He has no Jair Alexander against that defense. I'm not worried that all his balls are going to be deep. I am worried about Luton in weather, but at the same time, Chark feels like he's destined for double-digit targets again. So it'd be Thielen and Chark, and then after that, I'm probably going Boyd. I mean, he can do his work in the short game in that, but if you want to completely avoid the weather, then it's Kirk.
Yeah, just Kirk. Yeah. I want to trust Christian Kirk, Brandon, but I'm not quite there yet. Like, I play him in leagues where I have to. I have to play him in flex because my receivers are all banged up. But in that situation with so many other more talented or higher floor options, let's call them, I'd have a really hard time actually choosing him.
But it was four weather guys, and the only non-weather guy was Kirk.
I know, and in that game's supposed
and
to
it's a lot of touchdowns too, and you always feel a little bit leery when you're not following volume as much as you are just following touchdowns there, and you're talking about a guy who, I guess he's moving into the wide receiver 2 equation, but Larry Fitzgerald was getting more targets consistently for a long, long time. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky, but I think there's going to be a lot of offense in that game. So I actually give Kirk a good chance of finding the end zone once again.
Speaking of the Cardinals, Kenyon Drake expected to play today. He's working his way back from an ankle injury, but I think the question is pretty simple. Is Kenyon Drake the most valuable back in that backfield, or is Chase Edmonds, even with Drake's return, actually the better play at this point? What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, Chase Edmonds had an opportunity last week or when last they played to be the guy, and it was kind of meh. It wasn't, so the problem here is that Kenyon Drake's coming back, and Chase Edmonds didn't really do anything to wrest control of being the featured guy here. I would expect when Kenyon Drake comes back, that you're probably going to see something very close. If it's this weekend if it's today against Buffalo, then I think you're going to see something very close to a straight up platoon.
Yeah, I think with Edmonds having a steady role in the passing game, that gives him a nice bump every single week. I could see production ending up 60-40, even if the touches are more even than that overall. So glad we could help Shirley out by touching on that situation here. Let's talk about the San Francisco receivers. Deebo Samuel still out. Brandon Ayuk, Kendrick Bourne expected back today. Bourne didn't practice all week, so we'll see what happens once the inactives come out for that game. Richie James put up big numbers against the Packers in that Thursday night game last week. Jake, what do you make of this group as they sort of scramble to figure things out in an offense that no longer has George Kittle at its disposal?
As Nick Mullins scrambles about, yeah, the only one I would really trust is Ayuk. Richie James was exciting for what he did, but everybody was on Trent Taylor for that game. Nobody was saying start Richie James. I don't even know that a lot of people haven't had him inside their top 100 of wide receivers last week. So, Richie James deserves to be noted. Like at this point, with no Kendrick Bourne practicing all week, as you mentioned, he was touchdown reliant to begin with. I'd probably start Richie James in front of Kendrick Bourne, but I just want to go to Brandon Ayuk, and that's kind of about it. I think that he could be the volume guy until Deebo comes back, and then it's them two going forward. So I think Ayuk comes into play. It's not, exciting with Nick Mullins at quarterback, but I think that I would say Ayuk's a wide receiver 3.
Got a question with Ayuk featured in it here from Tom. You got to sit one of Jarvis Landry, Hollywood Brown, Ayuk, and Josh Reynolds. What do you think about that one, Jake?
Yeah, Reynolds is in there because I have sleeper option here in the last 2 weeks of games, or last 2 games for the Rams, as the fact that they turned it to 11. They're kind of going away. Is what we talk about with Sean McVay all the time. In season, he changes how he attacks teams and attacks his game plan. We saw at the end of last year, he started turning to a lot of 12. Well, now he stopped that. And he's like, all right, let's go back to some 11. And now we'll go 3 wide. And Josh Reynolds, for the past 2 games, has all of a sudden turned himself into a wide receiver 4. I'm still not going that far where I'd bench the only one of those three would be benching Hollywood Brown for him. I could see it because Hollywood does have the weather, but go back to what I said in case this person wasn't tuning in at that point, was Hollywood could still take a 10-yard catch and go and just take off, and then he's gone. And so if you want to bench him, it's definitely, I would say at this point, Reynolds is the safer floor, but the higher ceiling is still with Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, I was following your same line of logic. I think if you're going for a big upside, yeah, you're going for Hollywood Brown. But if I got three teams that have that opinion, I might pick Josh Reynolds in more of them. So I think it's pretty close. But I like your take on it being the safer play with Reynolds and a little bit more of the higher upside gamble with Hollywood Brown.
He's a running back.
Pete has a question about DJ Dallas, which
coincidentally
is like the next thing on the rundown. I was going to say Chris Carson is out again, and we're probably going to have another gross split between DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. I believe Alex Collins is available if the Seahawks want to involve him. Is this a complete avoid, even though this situation looks like a perfect shootout sort of matchup?
Well, the Rams are not easy to run on, and especially DJ Dallas, who is not a great kind of yak guy and somebody who's, I don't think he's super talented as a runner, frankly, just from what I've seen. So, and you're going to mix in Travis Homer and Alex Collins. It's going to be touchdown or bust, I think, for DJ Dallas.
Yeah, I would go Travis Homer in that one. He was out yards and 90 yards last week. So DJ Dallas rescued his day with a touchdown.
I think it's possible that Seattle just abandons the run for the most part and just goes to somebody like Homer, who's good in the passing game.
Which is why I would go Homer in this one.
Yeah.
In Jonathan's situation, I think you'd almost be more comfortable playing Jamal Williams than DJ Dallas. I mean, because
he just hopes he gets 10 touches and a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, if that game plays to script, the weather's that bad, they're going to be running the ball a lot in Green Bay. Maybe they don't want to put 25 carries on Aaron Jones this week, so it's a 10 or 12 carry sort of week for Williams in that complimentary role. But
or it's MVS again in the short game.
MVS on some kind of jet sweep. Yeah, that's probably how it goes down. I had a follow-up question for you guys on this Seattle Rams matchup, because everybody's all over the passing games, and for good reason. It's, again, supposed to shoot out. I keep thinking from a DFS tournament perspective, if there's ever a week for Sean McVay to screw everybody, it's Darrell Henderson getting 3 touchdowns somehow, right? And Goff only throwing for 1 or 2, and the receivers coming up short. Like, I feel like that's the ultimate tournament leverage play. I don't want to play Darrell Henderson, but the setup is actually pretty good with everybody chasing that passing game.
No, I thought you were gonna say Cam Akers coming out of the bye. It's Sean. Tell me, it's Sean McVay. Would you surprise it? Hell, what if it's Malcolm Brown day? That's what Sean McVay does. And kudos to him. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. Similar to Bill Belichick, he's gonna go out there and attack you how he wants to attack you. They had their bye. We heard Cam Akers earlier this season. He's getting a bigger load, gets 1 touch. Then we hear Cam Akers needs to do more for him to get more touches. And then it's all over. And now they've had their bye. Out of the bye, I want to touch nobody on this backfield. I understand what you're saying, a DFS play. Sure, I'll throw him in 1 out of 20 lineups. Maybe I'll take one of the Rams.
Yeah, 20. It might take 20 lineups for me to get to Darrell Henderson, but it just seems like the ultimate leverage play. No one wants to play him, and the situation's actually pretty good if you can kind of hold your nose as you build that lineup. From the Sunday night game, Mark Ingram is expected to return. If that happens, does that change your volume outlook for J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards? Or do you think, Brandon, we're at the point now where Mark Ingram's just the third guy and it doesn't have that much of an impact at all?
I don't know. I really don't know. We saw what this 3-headed monster looked like in the first few weeks of the season. It's terrible. I don't know. I mean, maybe Mark Ingram's the third running back, but he's still probably getting mixed in. There's just not enough volume. And when Lamar Jackson's taking some of that volume as well, Gus Edwards is probably the safest guy because they'll give him the ball at the goal line and maybe you get a touchdown out of him, which we've seen happen plenty of times. But J.K. Dobbins is my favorite, but I'm not sure yet that he's John Harbaugh's favorite.
It's the same as the Rams. Stay away.
It's very
to a lesser degree.
I mean, in a different situation, Mark Ingram might be very startable. In this situation, he's just absolutely terrible.
He already was kind of the third guy to begin with, even when he was healthy.
It was surprising, definitely very surprising to see how much they were spreading the ball around in that backfield. For Monday, no David Montgomery for the Bears. We're also keeping an eye on Allen Robinson's knee, limited practice 3 days in a row for him. But Jake, how's this going to work in the Chicago backfield without David Montgomery? It's been ugly volume for him for weeks. So how do they distribute carries now?
I think Ryan Nall is going to be the lead unless they promote Lamar Miller today or yesterday. Was yesterday the deadline? Because if they didn't do it by a certain point, I know they can't. So if Lamar Miller is out there, maybe he gets sprinkled in similar to Alfred Morris, surprising us from the Giants. But I think it'll be Ryan Nall, but I don't think it'll be 20 touches. Ryan Nall, Cordarrelle Patterson's still going to get his work out of the backfield and get mixed in there like he's, better Tavon Austin these days. So I'd say Ryan Nall. Where do I have him? I have Ryan Nall around the Ronald Jones, Devin Singletary, Joshua Kelly. Even though he's the lead, he's in that backup conversation just because I don't know that this offense is going to help much. It's similar to like other offenses like the Giants running game. Like if you're the lead running back in this backfield, does that really even matter much?
Well, yeah, and I should say, the Bears have the worst fantasy production out of their backfield, lower than the Jets. So you got to look at Ryan Nall and Cordarrelle Patterson as something less than a Frank Gore, LaMichael Pirine split. And what does that get you?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a bad backfield for a reason. It's not entirely David Montgomery's fault. It's at least partially his fault, I think, at this point, though. So an easy avoid situation. But the Allen Robinson situation, if he doesn't play, that offense is screwed, even against Minnesota. Let's move on to some matchups. We're going to take a look at Jake's adjusted points allowed for this week. And one of the more interesting matchups before the weather kind of blew it up was the Browns. And it's been surprising to see the Steelers as a team that you can throw on. The question, I think, if the weather weren't so bad, would be, do you trust Baker Mayfield, getting healthier, coming out of the bye week, and now having Nick Chubb back? It's probably a more balanced sort of offense, but I'm really curious, Jake, what's your trust level with Mayfield sort of beyond this week, since you mentioned before that he's not necessarily a guy that you're on for week 10?
Yeah, I don't think I have, but trust and Baker Mayfield don't go hand in hand. That's a certainty. I would say unless it's a potential shootout against a weak defense, he's not even coming into the conversation as a mid QB2, just because without Odell Beckham, and I know there was the arguments out there, he doesn't have Odell Beckham, so that'll loosen him up a little bit, and he doesn't have to force to look his way. Rashard Higgins is not Odell Beckham. You go down the ranks, Kadarius Hodge is not Odell Beckham. So I understand the argument. I just can't take an elite player away from him and say, oh yeah, he'll be better, especially Jarvis Landry not being 100%. So is he playable in Superflex? Absolutely. Is he playable in 2-quarterback? Absolutely. Is he single quarterback? I won't even waste my time.
Let's bring on Michael Beller and talk about Joe Burrow for a moment. Burrow going up against the Steelers. What do you do with Burrow in this matchup? You have weather concerns. That's obviously going to lower the expectations a bit, but you get volume from him a lot. Do you still play Burrow this week in season-long leagues if you don't have a great alternative?
Yeah, I would be comfortable playing him. I'm not running away from him by any stretch of the imagination. And the thing that concerns me a little bit more than the weather for him is what we're looking at with the Pittsburgh front seven and the Pittsburgh pass rush. The one team that really has counteracted Joe Burrow's volume and made it so it didn't matter, made it totally moot because they just completely controlled the Cincinnati offensive line was Baltimore a couple of weeks ago, a game that the Ravens won 27-3. And I would worry a little bit about Pittsburgh being able to put forth a similar script and make life hard on Joe Burrow in that entire Cincinnati passing game this afternoon. But I just don't think that's reason enough to run away from him. Now, when I say reason enough to run away from him, I still put him in like the QB 14 to 16 range. I don't think he's necessarily a slam dunk play by any stretch of the imagination today, but I also don't think you need to go reaching because of weather concerns, because of matchup concerns. He gets a ton of volume. We've seen these three receivers develop in this offense with him, and when he has these options, Giovanni Bernard doing what he does out of the backfield as well, there's still a lot to like here. So full disclosure too, I'm starting him in a 2 QB league, so I'll be riding with you. Just don't think you need to totally go away from him, even though the concerns that are there for him and really this entire passing game today are valid.
Yeah, it's really strange because the Steelers are stingy against quarterbacks, but they're not great against wide receivers. It doesn't seem like those things really square up all that well.
They give up big plays. That's why they lead the league in air yards per reception and 20-plus plays. That's why.
And I guess if you think about the conditions today, big plays a bit less likely to happen. So it could be tough sledding for Joe Burrow and company in this matchup. Let's talk about Antonio Gibson for a moment. Something I did not realize. This is according to Ben Standig, covers the Washington Footballs for The Athletic. Antonio Gibson is 125th in pass blocking according to Pro Football Focus. That is absolutely
good.
brutal. Jake, what's your concern level with Gibson, maxing out opportunities, especially in a backfield where they have another capable pass catcher in J.D. McKissic?
Yeah, I told you. Remember, I hate him apparently because I am at 15 at running back, so that means I hate him. He's trash. It's a good matchup. The issue with Antonio Gibson is J.D. McKissic, unlike the conversation we were having earlier, this compared to Josh Jacobs. He's on a lesser team, and he's Josh Jacobs, but also with pass blocking concerns. So you look at McKissic, who is adept in that area, who's also a very good pass catcher, who has turned into James White for this team. I think that going forward, Antonio Gibson is nothing more than a high-end RB2 because it's going to be 12 to 18 carries per week, and he'll probably be in that 70 to 80-yard rushing upside, but he has to score a touchdown to really have RB1 value because he's not going to make it up in the passing game because they don't trust him.
I want to move on to the Broncos-Raiders matchup for a moment, and Beller, part of the appeal here on the Denver side is that the Raiders can't stop the run. The problem, of course, is that Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay are trying to share those touches. But as you look at some of the changes to the over-unders around the league, this is one of the higher-scoring games of the week. Once you get past Rams Seahawks and Bills Cardinals, Broncos Raiders sort of jumps off the page. So with this good matchup for the running game, is there any way to take advantage of that with either one of Melvin Gordon or Phillip Lindsay this week?
I mean, I think you can start both of them. We've talked about these guys quite a bit on our suite of podcasts, and the thing here is, I know Jake agrees with me on this. We've talked about Phillip Lindsay quite a bit, and we're in agreement that Phillip Lindsay's the better running back, but that doesn't change the fact that Melvin Gordon is still going to get enough volume in a game that we expect to be high-scoring to be playable. So I think you can go into this with RB2 expectations for both of them. I wouldn't want to play both of them on the same fantasy team, but if I had either one, I would feel pretty decent about both of them returning RB2 value in this matchup. And frankly, that goes across the board for this game. Drew Lock, Derek Carr, everyone involved in the passing game, all the running backs. If you are a legitimate fantasy starter where you're even questioned, should I play you, should I not? I think the answer is yes. I think this is going to be a game that is dominated by both offenses. And you like where the spread's falling to, 4.5, 5, 5.5, depending on where you're looking. It just all points to a game that is going to be very offensive. And when you look at some of the other weather concerns across the country and know that this game doesn't carry any of those, I think it's going to be a fun game to be invested in, even if that is just, volume and hoping for a touchdown with Melvin Gordon or betting that Phillip Lindsay can make the most of the 12 or so touches he's likely to get in this one.
We're going to dig into the Raiders side of this matchup with Tashan Reed a little bit later on in today's show. Everybody, as I mentioned earlier, everybody loves the Rams receivers, and for good reason. Seattle's pass defense is atrocious. Jake, you put the APA together every single week. Is this historically bad to see this number, a 62? Like the second worst against wide receivers this season is 43.2. That's a massive difference. How bad is this Seattle pass defense really?
It's god awful, honestly. Yes, it is. Nothing's ever hit 60 before. No team's ever hit the 60 mark. I think the highest I've ever seen before was like 55, maybe 56. And that's usually early in the season too, where the data is a little bit more skewed. But yeah, going forward, whether it's now, past, whatever, they've been up that mark around almost the entire season, because for everybody out there, what the APA takes into account is also the strength of the opponent. Like if you face Pittsburgh every single week and those wide receivers, you'd be expected to give up more than if you're facing the Browns with Noah Beckham every single week. That's what APA accounts for, is who are you facing? It's not just what do you give up. So they're giving up to trash wide receivers and they're giving it up to good wide receivers. So that's why before, when Brandon and I were talking, and that's why Josh Reynolds comes into play this week, is because he's been somewhat consistent. Now they're running a lot of 3 wide sets, and it's an amazing matchup. Heck, I mean, you could see somebody else go further down the roster for the Rams potentially score today, but you have to like Woods, you have to like Kupp, both as top 15 wide receivers, especially when you start to account in the fact of Allen Robinson having to wait for Monday Night Football and some of these other top 15 wide receivers dealing with weather. They're kind of pushing themselves ahead of the pack now.
Now, at the other end of the list, the Seahawks actually have the most difficult matchup for their wide receivers. You think about Jalen Ramsey in particular. Yeah, like if you're looking at DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who do you think Jalen Ramsey matches up against?
He said he's not going up against either. He said he's not shadowing. So, well, this is going to be interesting. He said he's not shadowing.
Hello, Porter. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't think it would. If he was shadowing one, would you really sit that guy down though when it's Metcalf and Lockett?
If it was Lockett, yeah.
Interesting.
Would you really?
Yeah,
I mean,
well, look at Lockett's got 2
incredibly
great
boomer
games.
bust.
Yeah, 2 great games, 2 pretty good games, and 4 awful games. He's been Amari Cooper before Dak Prescott's Amari Cooper. I mean, Beller, if I told you he's getting Jalen Ramsey the entire game, wouldn't you be like, well, okay, maybe I'll sit below Tyler Lockett?
I would be a little concerned about it for sure. I just think you would have, in the real world, I think you would have to be very deep at wide receiver to really be able to turn away from Tyler Lockett. But I do agree with you. We talked about this earlier this week. Incredibly boomer bust all season. And, I mean, that's been Tyler Lockett's nature, right, for a good portion of his career. But this year, it's gone to new heights. Like you said, Jake, the 2-3 touchdown games and then a whole lot of nothing mixed in there too. But if Jalen Ramsey's moving around, you're going to not really feel comfortable benching either of these guys. And still, it's going to be, I think, a very high-scoring game between these two teams.
Yeah, I think that game, and as I mentioned before, Cards-Bills will be really fun shootouts to stack players in for DFS and to just enjoy from a season-long fantasy.
Travis Homer, 3
perspective as
touchdowns coming in.
if Homer and
Jacob
Darrell Henderson have a
action.
combined 6 TDs today, the tilt is going to be unbelievable. I'm kind of rooting for that chaos. I think I would actually be happier seeing it happen.
I'm gonna build a lineup, Beller DVR just for you with them in it.
You have to do it. Let's move on to our whiteboards segment. It's my favorite segment of the week. It has replaced fantasy fill in the blank. That was my favorite for a while. This is like a better version of that because. Yeah, we got Brandon Funston back. We're going to bring on Ed Mallion as well. And we've got, he's back. He's back home. He's off the paper towel plan. He's got the real whiteboard going. Good morning,
hockey
Ed.
jersey behind him.
Yeah, what's St. Louis Blues, man? What's going on with the Blues? I don't know the connection there.
You got to turn your mic on, Ed.
Oh, Ed.
Can't hear the explanation.
I've had it since
There
I
we
was
go.
it's a boring story. I've had it since I was 14 years old. But yeah, it's just, I'm just trying to fit in with all this American nonsense you guys like. So
You need like a bag of Doritos or something behind you too, just to get the full effect. But all right, gentlemen, let's begin with our first whiteboard question. Which will be greater today, Evan Ingram's receiving yard total or Jalen Reagor's receiving yard total?
Ooh, I like
Two
it.
guys that are pretty nice plays in DFS. Evan Ingram's target, the volume's been going up a lot the last couple of weeks. That's a good spot for it. We got a Reagor. We got another Reagor. We have another Reagor there, and one Ingram.
Solo,
All right.
What up?
Oh,
I guess
nice.
Beller gets the first opportunity here. Why Evan Ingram, Beller?
Because he wants to talk again.
Yeah.
I do love talking.
Classic
I do
Beller.
love talking. I love the FaceTime. I just got a haircut. My wife did me up yesterday, so feeling good. Want to get some camera time. Look, Dallas Goedert back fully healthy. Miles Sanders back fully healthy. Big time presence in that Philadelphia Eagles offense. Evan Ingram, we talked about this last week, right? He's probably the top 2 pass catcher on that team along with Sterling Shepard. So I'm just betting on what I think is going to be a little bit more reliable volume here. If I knew these guys were going to have equal looks in their offenses, I'd probably make this unanimous and lean toward Reagor. But I do think there's reason to bet on more targets, more opportunities for Evan Ingram. And as stone handy as he can be from time to time, he's been capitalizing on that volume over the last few weeks. So I will bet on volume, bet on target share, bet on having a bigger presence in the offense, and go with Evan Ingram in this one.
3 for 16 and a score. Also had a carry in Week 8 against the Cowboys for Reagor. Probably a larger role coming here. Ed, what do you think about Jalen Reagor this week? What do you like him?
I quite like him. I think the problem with Evan Ingram is obviously that like a lot of his stuff's going to be short and intermediate. Daniel Jones is mediocre, let's say. But Jalen Reagor, we saw like his first catch for the Eagles was this huge deep shot. I think that really the fact that he can go deep means that Goddard can eat a little bit more underneath. Miles Sanders out the backfield as well. So it's more of a game plan sort of thing. And, just the sorts of targets that Reagor is going to be getting for me are much more appetizing than what Evan Ingram is going to be working with, even if Ingram probably more likely for a red zone target, I guess.
All right, we got a question here from CFC fan full PPR. Needs 2 out of Jerick McKinnon, Sterling Shepard, Joshua Kelly, and Jalen Reagor. I mean, Kelly.
First 2.
Yeah, first 2, McKinnon and Shepard.
Move on.
Agreed.
All right, easy consensus there. Let's move on to our next whiteboard prompt. Let's talk about DJ Moore. Give me DJ Moore's line today against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's been a nice little crowd in that Carolina offense over the course of this season. We've got a DFL. Care to elaborate?
Dead effing last. I I don't want to start DJ Moore, and I don't want to bench DJ Moore because you can never predict his good or bad game. And if you have him, you're stuck with him. You just got to plug him out there every single week or you're going to miss it. Look, they got touchdowns up there, but DJ Moore might get 30 yards. It's that you have to play him.
Look at Ed and I. We're almost.
And you definitely played Giovanni Bernard over him.
That's incredible. Wow. You guys are in lockstep there.
Than you guys, just a tiny bit though. We're basically all on the same page.
Beller's trying to get.
You're trying to take the microphone again, Beller.
Yeah, okay. Let's go to Brandon on this one. All right. Why do you trust him? What do you like about DJ Moore?
I don't know that I trust him. I know that he's talented. This feels like it's been so much emphasis on Curtis Samuel that maybe they'll zag this week. I think Jake's right. Like, I'm not predicting a whole lot of catches and yards here. It's you're hoping for the touchdown. He's definitely a bit of a dice roll at this point, considering how much they've liked Curtis Samuel the last 3 weeks, and Robbie Anderson's been the lead guy the whole time. It's just, man, DJ Moore is a very talented guy. I feel like maybe after a couple weeks of kind of being relegated to DFL, as Jake would put it, that maybe he'll bubble back up. He had a great game against Tampa earlier this season, so we can at least lean on that a little bit.
DFL seems a little extreme. He's not quite as bad as Jake is making it out.
That's where he deserves to be. I didn't say this.
It's crowded though, to say the least. Let's go to our next one. Who will have more fantasy points in Week 10? Assume 6 points for a passing TD. Is it Tua Tagovailoa or Drew Lock, which actually is going to help Christian along the way?
Wait, was this passing yards or total points?
More fantasy points.
Fantasy points.
Fantasy points. We got a Tua from Ed. We've got another Tua from Brandon, a Tua from Beller, and it's a sweep. It's Tua from Jake. All right, so why is it a sweep, Jake?
Because Tua runs. We get the fun matchup here, but I'm going to go for Tua because that first game, he legitimately looked tentative. There's no question about it. And it looks like he just needed that game to get comfortable in the NFL. You saw the passing upside, which people are concerned about. Looked good last week, and then you got the rushing on top of it. And I feel like he has to run even a little bit more given the situation now with this team with all the injuries, which, by the way, on the flip side is Devontae Parker might turn into that top 10 wide receiver that we saw last year with no Preston Williams.
I do like Tua stacks a lot from a DFS perspective this week.
Well, speaking of which, I finished the lineup DVR. I did put in your Darrell Henderson, Travis Homer lineup. I am throwing $3 in the trash.
All right. Well, if you win the $200K for that tournament,
no, it's a single entry $3. So I think I can only win like $5,000. It's $3 in the trash.
Well, you could still kick a lunch or something my way if that ends up working out.
Okay,
for you.
I'll kick a lunch.
Let's go to our next one. Give me 3 words to predict Duke Johnson's Week 10 performance. There's a lot of interest in Duke because David Johnson, of course, is out with a concussion this week. We haven't seen Duke Johnson get heavy workloads very often in his career. It's always been one of those things where we've wanted him to get more opportunities. Always a steady pass catcher, and we saw last week a career high workload for him. 16 carries and 4 catches, turned that into 73 yards and a touchdown. We got an Edmonds-like wooey. Was that?
Woo-woo! DuckTales, you moron.
I'm 36 years old, man. I haven't watched DuckTales in 25 years. Fair to middling volume means points, and volume-based blurry mediocrity. Okay.
Yeah.
Guys,
volume-based
so I have
3
blurry
words.
Mediocrity sounds about right. You use a hyphen to get that extra word.
You just combined Ed's and mine into one, Beller. Again, trying to take the microphone.
No,
every single time.
Mine took a little longer to write, but I mean, we're on the same page here, right? I mean, if you have Duke Johnson, if you scooped him, you're going to play him and you're going to be happy with it. But it's all because of the volume here, and maybe the weather plays to his advantage in this game. Not only because of Houston potentially turning more into the run, but you talk about a pair of receivers more hurt by adverse weather conditions, especially wind conditions. I don't think you can find a pair that's more hurt by it than Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. So maybe that means even more receiving volume for Duke Johnson. The volume is going to be there, no doubt about it. And we always follow that at the running back position. So, hey, Duke Johnson, moment is yours.
Yeah, and I think the point here, Duke Johnson's not a great running, an actual running back, and it's not a good matchup for him against Cleveland. So if they had to lean more on the run, he's not a big yak guy. I think there's a reason why he very rarely has ever had double-digit carries in his career, and he's had opportunities. I don't think coaches believe in him as a true kind of featurey kind of guy. So, yeah, I think a lot of it has to come in the passing game. And the weird thing to this point is Houston hasn't thrown the ball to their running backs a ton for as good as those guys are. They're kind of middle to late middle in terms of volume targets in the passing game.
Yeah, I think this is more Gio Bernard, Boston Scott type stuff on tap here for Duke Johnson in Week 10. Let's move on to our next one. How many Rams skill players will have over 80 total yards against the Seahawks today? We were talking earlier about just how juicy this matchup is for the Rams receivers, especially. Massive, massive issues stopping the pass for that Seattle defense all season long. Jake weighs in with a 5.
Ooh.
That's a big number. I got a 3 from Ed, a 3 from Brandon, and a 3 from Beller. Jake, X gets the square. Why is it 5? And who are they going to be?
Because you said skill player, so we're including quarterback here. But I say Reynolds, Woods, Cup, and Henderson.
Yeah,
that's 4.
See, you're on board with Henderson now. So, all right. So Ed,
All
you're shaking your
everybody.
head no. What are your concerns?
Just I think it'll be spread around. 80 yards, all-purpose yards. Like there's a chance that one of the running backs gets there. Like Josh Reynolds is like more like a 67 or 73 sort of guy who you regret starting. Maybe like Higbee, Gerald Everett. Like there's just so many random names. I'm not big into it. I don't really like the Rams today at all.
So you just mentioned a whole bunch of names that can make it happen.
He's got an important note from our producer, Nando DeFino. Dustin Hopkins in at kicker for the Washington Footballs today.
Really?
So, Jake, make sure you make some adjustments to your
Get him
ranks as soon as possible. Let's move on to our there it goes. Let's move on to our next one. This is a true or false question. Lamar Jackson is going to get back on his 2019 track the rest of the season. So true or false, we see 2019 Lamar Jackson the rest of the way. I have no idea on this one. I've been very surprised that we've seen from this Baltimore offense. Some pessimism coming in from the right side of my screen. Oh, we got an emoji kind of drawn in there too.
Yeah, I like it.
And it looks like a sweep. False until week 14. Okay, well, elaborate on that, Jake. What happens in week 14?
One of the most amazing playoff schedules you can find in fantasy. And Lamar Jackson, that's why a lot of people are like, oh, should I send Deshaun Watson for Lamar Jackson? I'm telling them, like, I don't want to do that because Watson's been the better quarterback, but everybody's looking at the schedule, and the Ravens could really blow up and win people championships from week 14, 15, to 16. So that's why.
Yeah, and I just said false. Actually, I think Lamar Jackson's like a great buy low or whatever you want to call it. Last year was historic, epic production, and we all expected regression. I just said false because I don't think he's going to get back to that, but I think he's going to be better than what he's been in the first half of the season.
One other injury item to pass along as inactives have been trickling in. No Laviska Shenault today for the Jags. Let's move on to our next toss-up here on this whiteboard segment. Give me Antonio Brown's line for Week 10. I mean, it was an absolute nightmare performance for that Bucs offense on Sunday night against the Saints. I think the expectation that I had was that Brown would quickly emerge to be, the number 2 receiver in this offense behind Chris Godwin. We've seen this offense support more than a few pass catchers to this point. So I'm just curious where you guys stand on Antonio Brown here going into his second game with the Bucs.
Nice, Brandon.
Guys, whoa, Ed wants the camera. Ed wants it right now. Okay, 6 for 88 and 2 touchdowns. This is a big one for Antonio Brown. What do you like about this matchup for him, Ed?
No, I'm starting Antonio Brown, so I need this today.
Speak it into existence, Ed.
Precisely. Sometimes you have to visualize these things to make them happen. And I think that, what we're going to have with Antonio Brown is going to be very unpredictable. But the fact is that this guy, he still looked like he's got it in his hands. He's still got the route running ability. I think that he can blow the top off defenses. He might only have 4, 5, 6 catches, but he could easily go over 100 yards. I think the talent is clearly still there. Who knows who's going to get the ball in the red zone? Who knows who's going to get the ball between the 20s? I just feel like Brown at some point is going to explode, and then you're going to start in the following week, and he's going to really disappoint you. It's just going to be one of those situations where there are too many mouths to eat in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I definitely see that being a problem most weeks in that offense. We got another question that just popped up. It's related to the Houston backfield. CJ Prosise was elevated to the active roster because if you look at that depth chart, it was kind of like, who's actually going to threaten Duke Johnson's touches? So I need a percentage chance that CJ Prosise reaches double-digit touches today. This is basically a question of, can CJ Prosise cause Duke Johnson to be a bust? Whoa, he got a 49% for Brandon. No one's topping that, right? Come on. There's no...
Come on. Who's going to price is right me?
There's no way someone's going to
Not a
price
chance.
right him to
I'm
get the
$1
mic
you.
here. A 12.
Hey, nice,
a
Ed.
12.9. Okay, that's cool that you guys kind of agree on that. And 1%?
You can't see it.
No, 1? Yeah, it looks like a 1. All right. Well, why, Brandon? Just the lack of
Because,
faith
like
in
what
Duke?
I said before, this Duke Johnson's not a great running back. He's a good receiving running back. He's just not a great rushing running back. And this is a tough defense.
Process?
No, Duke Johnson. Process. I would say he's a better running back, man. He's going to go down as one of the most underachieving for his talent running backs during his time here. I mean, I saw him in Seattle. He looked great when he's healthy, and I think they're going to need him today because I think they're going to have to go run heavy. And if this wins as bad as it is, I think they're going to have to run a lot. And I think Process is a guy they might find has more success than Duke Johnson in straight up rushing game.
There's a question for the group from JoJo. Duke or Mike Davis in a half-point PPR league? Would anybody play Duke in that situation?
No.
Yeah, no need to use the whiteboards there. So
I'm starting Duke today, and I wouldn't start him in that spot. So,
There you
yeah, if
go.
you're starting Duke Johnson, you don't feel good about it. It's more of, well, I picked him up off the waiver wire because I'm short at running back, or I've got somebody on bye, and I've got to throw him out there. Our next question is a team-related question. The Browns, Dolphins, Raiders, and Cardinals are all 5-3 of those teams. Which of those teams will make the playoffs? It could obviously be more than one if you think there's a chance that multiple teams from that group are going to make the playoffs. Browns, Dolphins, Raiders, and Cardinals, all 5-3 this week. Whoa, we got an all of them from Brandon, who's just going over the top. Wow. Okay. And let's see. Got a Dolphins and Cards from Ed. And we've got a Arizona, Miami. Arizona, 100%. So you think the Cardinals are absolutely in, Beller?
There's no doubt about the Cardinals making the playoffs, making some noise in the playoffs. I think the Cardinals are going to win the NFC West. I think that with the way that team has really climbed this season and what we see from that offense, that they are going to be able to win this division. And they're the one team in that division to slay the dragon. And what I like about them is that you can't really beat Seattle by slowing them down, right? The two games they lost to Arizona, put up 37 points. They lost to Buffalo, put up 44 points. In both of those losses, Seattle themselves put up 34 points. So forget about slowing down that offense. You need to be able to outscore them. Arizona has proven that they can do that, and I think that that is going to carry them to a division title. If they beat Arizona, if they beat Seattle in the rematch, if they sweep that, then they are clearly the team with the inside track, and I just love what we've seen from that offense, the growth from Kyler Murray, the growth from Cliff Kingsbury as a play caller, even though it didn't quite come through last week against Miami with some of the decisions that were made there. But I just think Arizona is going to show itself to be the best team in that division, and they're going to be a really dangerous team in the playoffs this season.
Well, yeah, and you know what? Looking at all these teams' schedule, they're all – the reason I said all of them, they're all pretty good, and we got a 7-team playoff slate this year, so there's extra viability. But I agree with Michael. Arizona was the easiest one here because you got to remember there's nobody else coming out of the NFC East. So it's if you're already 5-3 and you're kind of even with Chicago, I mean, you got to feel good if you're Arizona if that's who you're fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah, that's not a good Bears team. It's more of like a 3-5 Bears team on true talent, maybe even more like 2-6 at this point. I could see them just falling apart in the second half of this season. Last whiteboard question for you guys. Who is the leading rusher for the Chargers today? Justin Jackson placed on IR with that knee injury. Kalen Ballage back on the active roster. Troymaine Pope is questionable with a neck injury. And, of course, Joshua Kelly is still in that backfield as well. We've got a that's a good answer. Justin Herbert. We got a Kelly. I think we're gonna have to go to Ed for sure, no matter what Beller writes down. I mean, you could write down something.
I'm
totally
slow, but
ridiculous.
I've got Pope if he plays, Kelly if he doesn't.
Okay, nice nuanced response, but Ed, Justin Herbert, the floor is yours.
Justin Herbert will lead in fantasy points rushing because he could easily just rush in a TD. I think the rest of that, like the whole Jackson, Kelly, Pope thing, pretty gross. Seeing Kalen Ballage suddenly appear last week was one of the most distressing things that's happened this year. So I don't know. It's a bad situation. I can't wait for Austin Eckler to come back. But I think I wouldn't be starting any Chargers running backs. I'd rather go and find someone on the waiver wire.
Now, Baylor, I want to go to you real quick. There was a lot of love for Troymaine Pope in the beat writer roundup on The Athletic this week. So what do you see Pope's role shaping up to be if he's healthy enough to play?
Yeah, I'm really just following the fact that the last time we saw Troymaine Pope, he was bumping Joshua Kelly aside and was the second guy along with Justin Jackson, and both of them produced in that game. So, without inside information of our own, I think we just have to follow that and trust that the Chargers believe that he is their number 2 back when everyone's healthy, and the guy who he's behind is the one guy who isn't healthy here. So I'm really just following that more than anything. So if he's healthy, I think we can expect something to the lines of maybe 80% of what we would expect out of a Justin Jackson script. So what, Justin Jackson, we were probably going to be penciling him in for 15 carries, 5 targets, something like that. So I think we could get 12 carries and 3 targets for Troymaine Pope in this game. He's not going to have the full Justin Jackson role, but again, just look at the last time he was healthy. Look at the last time he was used. He was clearly ahead of Joshua Kelly and Kalen Ballage. I mean, that is a change on the fly sort of thing. The fact that they sent Kalen Ballage back to the practice squad and then had to bring him back with putting Justin Jackson to IR tells you exactly what this team thinks of Kalen Ballage, no matter how well he ran the ball when he was thrown into duty. So give me Pope as the number 1 guy here, assuming he's able to go.
Yeah, I do think the order in which teams turn to depth options gives us an idea of how they actually internally rank those players, and I think that's a really good point to make about Troymaine Pope. But keep an eye on the late inactive news this afternoon. A lot of late games in that window, so a lot of players still up in the air, even as we sign off here in about 40 minutes. Let's move on to our Brits Picks segment. Now, the fantasy playoffs are just a few weeks away, so we're looking for pickups and potential trade targets that are going to help you for the rest of the season. Now, a little earlier, I heard Jake mention Lamar Jackson. The schedule gets really nice for the fantasy playoffs, and I'll echo that. I mean, I think if you want to go make a trade for Lamar Jackson, I'm on board, but you may find it difficult for the person who has Lamar Jackson to actually part with him. So, Ed, who else do you like at the quarterback position the rest of the way who either could be available on waivers or might be a little easier to trade for at this point?
Well, this is it. I think, with fantasy, if you picked up James Robinson off the waiver wire this year, if you pick up Antonio Brown, he's a potential league winner who you just found on the waiver wire. So I'm here as the captain of your ship to steer you through some rocky waters. And at quarterback, I picked up Justin Herbert a few weeks ago. I think that if you did that, you're pretty happy. But if you haven't, then it's time to go out and get Tua Tagovailoa, to pronounce it as I hear you're supposed to. This week is a great start. It's a likely shootout with the Chargers. I think they're 27th or 28th against QBs this year, the Chargers, despite having a pretty good defense. Obviously lost Derwin James at the start of the year. Then it's Denver, 21st against quarterbacks, then the Jets, and then another probable rookie shootout with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. So that's 4 really winnable games where Tua could be putting up 25 points or more. If he's doing that, he's probably getting you close to winning every week, and he's getting you close to the playoffs. He's only rostered in about 60 to 70% of leagues, depending on your platform. So I think go out and get him because the alternatives on the waiver wire at the moment are pitiful. So yeah, I'm a big Tua guy.
So we just got a flood of questions asking about the hat. What's the story with the hat? Has it got a good backstory?
No, I just saw it on the side and I thought today felt like a captain's hat day, so I just went for it.
All right.
I think every Sunday should be a captain's hat day for you, Ed. That looks good.
Yeah. I think it's working for you. Let's move over to the running back position. If you're looking for some help at running back, who can you turn to the rest of the way, either on the waiver wire or as a trade target?
There are kind of 2 different categories. Firstly, there's like a 1B committee guy who could earn a bigger workload and likely overtake the 1A. Like, you've also got injuries on your side because if the first guy gets injured, he's kind of a handcuff. Duke Johnson was this sort of person before, but who's next? And for me, I think if you can get Zach Moss or Cam Akers for cheap, that's where you should be headed. Both have been held back, but eminently passable talent ahead of them. For me, Henderson, I think, and Singletary haven't really won those jobs outright. So these are guys who are producing, and these teams, both of them, Buffalo and the Rams, have to produce if they're going to get to the playoffs. They're both in pretty tough situations. So there's a bolt from the blue guy who I think you could look to this week, and that's Lamar Miller. Now, no one wants Lamar Miller. Ryan Pace found out the hard way that fantasy owners already know you've got to have backups in case plan A goes awry. Now, they could have signed Lev Bell this year. They could have signed Leonard Fournette this year, and they didn't. And that's why they're left with Lamar Miller now that David Montgomery's gone down with concussion. However, there's also this thing where you're looking for a change in circumstance in fantasy sometimes. It could be a new quarterback. It could be a new coach. And what you've got in Chicago, Bill Lazor's taking over the play calling. Now, I don't think that's going to wildly change a terrible offense, but if it improves it by 10 or 15%, and Lamar Miller comes in and has a big day against the Vikings tomorrow, you bought a lottery ticket for free, essentially, picking him up off the waiver wire. And if he earns a bigger role going forward, or if Montgomery goes down for a longer period, I think Lamar Miller could be a guy who puts up points. We haven't seen him since he had that injury, the ACL. So obviously there's a chance that he's just not the same guy. But if he looks back and fresh, he's a guy who scored fantasy points in this league and won leagues before. And I think, there's a chance he's your lottery ticket for this year.
Yeah, definitely a chance he could be that guy if he's completely healthy. I also wonder, too, even if Montgomery comes back and they share the workload, maybe both of those guys become more effective working in tandem instead of forcing volume to David Montgomery. Let's take a look at the wide receiver position. Who do you like at wide receiver as a potential buy low?
Low cost, high ceiling guys is what you're looking for, right? And I think we mentioned him earlier in the show, Jalen Reed in Philadelphia. There's there's a lot of buzz about him, especially with the fantasy community coming out of college, and then the injury at the start of the season. Carson Wentz been absolutely atrocious. Has been an issue for him, but he's going to get the volume. He's going to be the top wide receiver in Philadelphia for sure. I think if they can get back to where they should be, the Eagles, I know this season's kind of lost, but they're going to want to see stuff out of Riga. They're going to want to see stuff out of Wentz because, they drafted a second-round quarterback last year where there's a chance that we could see changes in Philadelphia. So that's what I like as my best option. I think as another option, Darnell Mooney is a deep threat in Chicago. Again, the Bill Lazor thing, change of circumstances might benefit him. And if Allen Robinson goes down, this could be 11, 12 targets a week for Darnell Mooney. And then there's another guy, we're looking for material change in circumstances, and that can mean a quarterback change. But Andy Dalton is going to come back after a couple of horrendous weeks for the Dallas Cowboys. And that means that CeeDee Lamb, I was here in preseason saying I think he's going to be the best offensive player in Dallas. If he hasn't been, then he's been pretty close. And CeeDee Lamb is an incredibly talented player. If he can catch passes from Andy Dalton for the rest of the year, he can be a startable receiver every single week. So CeeDee Lamb and Darnell Mooney are your backups. But if you can get Jalen Reed, he's only rostered in around 40% of leagues.
Yeah, it's a nice group altogether. I want to talk about Mooney with you for a second, Beller. What do you think his ceiling is in that offense? Because Anthony Miller, to me, he's the guy that should be their number 2 receiver, but he just hasn't seized that opportunity. Can Mooney become an 8+ target per week guy in this offense?
I think 8 is asking a little much. Over the last 3 weeks, we've seen 7, 6, and 11 in terms of targets for Darnell Mooney, and the 11 came with a 9-target game for Allen Robinson. I don't think you're going to see Darnell Mooney out-target Allen Robinson too often. I think what you're looking at as a weekly ceiling is what we saw a couple of weeks ago against the Saints. 5 grabs on 6 targets, 69 yards, and a touchdown. And what you like about Darnell Mooney when you're taking shots on guys like this is that he has a unique skill for the Bears offense. He is the guy who is going to push the defense, who's going to take the top off the defense and be that deep threat for the Bears. Allen Robinson is the best receiver on this team, obviously one of the best receivers in the league, but that's not really what they ask him to do. He's in sort of a Michael Thomas role for the Bears here, and Darnell Mooney's going to be the big play guy. Now, can the Bears offensive line give Nick Foles enough time to make those throws? Can Nick Foles actually make those throws when he gets the opportunity? That remains to be seen, but you do like that Darnell Mooney does have a unique skill that no one else in the Chicago offense is going to duplicate. So I do think he's someone who is at the very least worth having on the back end of your bench for the rest of the season. We still have plenty of buys coming up. You never know when injuries are going to strike. Mooney is a one big play guy who can really deliver for you if he does hit on that one big opportunity.
And Brandon, Ed touched on the Dallas receivers with Andy Dalton potentially coming back in Week 11, and with a good matchup against the Vikings, this offense could get a nice boost. Do you agree that it makes sense to go after some of those Dallas pass catchers?
I think Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb might be a lot more safer actually than Michael Gallup. I don't know about Michael Gallup. You look at what he's done with Andy Dalton so far. I think it's been like 2 catches on 8 targets for 23 yards in 2 games. And he really only has had 1 good game in fantasy this year. It was Dak Prescott against Seattle. And, Michael Gallup is a little bit more one note than CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. Not a great fit as a vertical guy with Andy Dalton's arm, but I think CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper as guys that might be able to get you, a steady diet of 5, 6 catches, 60, 70 yards are probably safe in that respect. So I would put Cooper and CeeDee Lamb as pretty close and Michael Gallup as a fairly distant third.
Now, we don't spend a lot of time in this show talking about fantasy defenses, but we're at the point in the season where you can sort of plot that course ahead, maybe pick up a defense now, or you trade next to nothing to get one now and actually set it and forget it for the next few weeks. So, Ed, who's that defense that stands out to you the rest of the way?
Well, I know what you're thinking. It's very early on a Sunday morning to be smoking crack, but bear with me. If your league, if your league has DSTs, then Seattle will be on the wire right now. But some point in the next 7 to 10 days, you can go and get them. Because yes, they play the Cardinals on Thursday, but after that, their schedule in weeks 12 to 15 reads Philadelphia, New York Giants, New York Jets, and the Washington football team. And the Seahawks D has been bad this year. We know that. It's been well covered, but they've been bad against Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott, a superhuman Cam Newton effort, which looks like it won't be repeated, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen. But like 3 of the 4 guys that the Seahawks are about to play will be lucky if they're backups next season. Even that might be too generous for Carson Wentz. So get to Seattle next week. You won't need them today. You definitely don't want them on Thursday against the Arizona Cardinals. But they could be a season-changing pickup for people who have been streaming all year because these are 4 of the worst offenses in the league, and you're going to get them back to back to back to back.
That's why he's the captain. He's looking far into the future, making sure you're on the right course to get to the fantasy playoffs and to win a fantasy championship. Ed, great stuff as always. Look forward to catching up with you again next week.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we say goodbye to Ed Mallion. We'll bring back Michael Beller and Brandon Funston in just a few minutes. But let's get to our guest today. Tashan Reed covers the Raiders for The Athletic. Tashan, good morning. Thanks for making some time for us today.
Good morning, man. How you doing?
Doing really well. I think Ed just dropped the line of the season on our show, so I'm still kind of reeling from that one. But I want to talk about this Raiders team with you. Derek Carr has a 16-2 touchdown to interception ratio this season, on pace for 4,000 yards for the 3rd straight season. He's not a top-tier fantasy quarterback, but he's playing very well. Do you think this is sustainable? Do you think he kind of hangs out as a league average quarterback that kind of plays up a bit because he's not making mistakes?
I think so, especially when you look at the schedule that he faced in the first 8 games. He played a lot of playoff teams, so a lot of tough defenses, and the second half of the schedule is pretty weak. They have more divisional games, so they get to, hit up the Chargers and the Broncos a couple of times, but also they play teams like the Jets and the Falcons. And so he'll have some opportunities where he's able to feast on some pretty poor defenses. And the other part of that is, hopefully as the season goes on, his offensive line is able to get a little bit more healthy. I think they're down 3 starters today, potentially 4 starters, and he's still been playing pretty well. So you would like to think as he plays weaker opponents and the offense gets a little bit healthier that he'd at least be able to sustain, if not improve upon, his play so far.
Yeah, I think week 5 at Kansas City is the game that sort of etched in my mind. He played so well in that spot, and that just seemed like Carr kind of reaching a level that Raiders fans have been hoping for a long time. Let's move on to Henry Ruggs. Just 10 catches through 6 games. 3 catches of 40-plus yards. The big playability has been there in those limited opportunities, but really it's just been 3 to 5 targets per game to this point. Now, we've seen a lot of rookies kind of pick up their production after the bye week. Now that we're into the second half of his rookie season, are you expecting more volume in the direction of Henry Ruggs going forward?
A little bit. I don't think it'll be a dramatic increase. Just the way that the floor of their offense goes. I believe they're last in wide receiver targets so far this year. And the thing with Ruggs, he's been a little bit of if you're a fantasy football owner of his, he's a little frustrated because, he's had these plays where he's open for a touchdown, open for a big catch, and, the ball is a little bit overthrown or the ball is there and he can only drag 1 foot. We talked to him this week and he said he's still adjusting to not being in college anymore a little bit with that. And so, I don't see his numbers ballooning in the second half of the season just because, the offense is a run-first offense and the number 1 receiving target is Darren Waller, and guys like Hunter Renfrow and Nelson Aguilar have been productive this season and even using the running backs out of the backfield. And so I'm not saying, him shooting up as their number 1 receiver or something in the second half of the season. Maybe he does start to figure out that time with Derek Carr and is able to hit on a few more of those deep shots. But as far as his targets per game, I don't see that necessarily increasing, but he's sort of a boomer bust guy. He might go off like he did against the Chiefs, but he also might have 0 catches. And so kind of just have to live with that if you're going to ride with him.
Yeah, kind of a what could go right sort of player at this point. And you mentioned this. I mean, Darren Waller functions as the top pass catcher in this offense. His production, though, has really changed from his breakout last season. He's really more of a yardage guy last year. Now he's getting into the end zone a lot more often. Is this who Darren Waller is going forward? Have they changed the ways that they're utilizing him, and that's caused the production to sort of shift in terms of where it's coming from?
I think a little bit of it has been some of those injuries that I mentioned. Henry Ruggs did miss a couple of games. Brian Edwards, the other starting receiver, he missed a few games. And so defenses were able to key in on Waller a little bit more, give him some bracket coverage, double team him, and limit those downfield passes. It's not that, Carr won't throw it downfield, because we've seen he's been more aggressive in that category. I believe he's averaging the most yards per attempt of his career so far. But Waller, he's been more so limited to those short to intermediate routes, no matter where they are in the field, whether it's the red zone or their own 20-yard line. And so, but I have noticed that they've started to go to him a little bit more in the red zone. Part of that is because Foster Moreau, I think he had 5 touchdown catches last year. He hasn't played as much with Jason Witten being added to the team. And at this point in career, Witten is mostly a blocker. He might get you a first down grab here and there, but Waller's really that big body. They're the main target in the red zone, especially with guys like, Tyrell Williams went on IR before the season, and Brian Edwards, their other big receiver, was hurt. So he's really their only true big receiving option who's in the game often enough in the red zone to kind of rack up those touchdowns. And so, yeah, I think this is something that, preferably for them, they want to unlock him and get him some more of that yardage, some more yardage for receptions. But as long as he's getting those touchdowns, I think he's been pretty useful in terms of fantasy production.
Let's talk about the backfield. Josh Jacobs has been a little bit of a different player in year 2, down about a full yard per carry from where he was a season ago. But he's also finding the end zone more often, much like Waller. What do you make of what we've seen from Jacobs at this point? I know you mentioned before the Raiders' offensive line has been really banged up. Do you think Jacobs becomes more efficient as the offensive line gets healthy? And how much of a threat is Devontae Booker to that workhorse workload that we're accustomed to seeing from Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, if you just look at the raw numbers for Jacobs, just in terms of yards per carry, it doesn't look very encouraging. But when you do have that context of the starting 5 offensive line that was projected going into the season has played all of 3 snaps this season. So it's kind of hard to blame the guy when he's running behind that. He still managed to be productive. I think he's top 5 in rushing yards, and he's up there in rushing touchdowns as well. And so even though he's not necessarily getting that gross yardage or as efficient on the ground, he's still been a viable option as far as your starting running back goes. Devontae Booker, he's been more hit and miss with his touches. The way they've kind of played it is, Jacobs may have a game where he has 28, 29, 30 carries, and Booker doesn't really see the ball. But then the next week, like they did against the Chargers, Booker actually led the team in rushing, and I think they split the carries about evenly. So they're kind of alternating it with Jacobs so they don't run him into the ground, because he did have some injury issues toward the end of last year, and they're trying to avoid that. And so, but I don't know about Booker as far as, I don't think I would start him, put him in my flex or anything like that, just because his touches are so inconsistent. And given, especially this week, that he's coming off a week where Jacobs didn't really receive that many carries, I would expect Jacobs' workload to increase against the Broncos. So I don't know if Booker, is leading the team in rushing again today.
Yeah, I'm with you, though, on Booker. I think he's showing enough in that limited role where if Jacobs were to get hurt, I think he's worth having stashed away on the bench, whereas, a few weeks ago, I would have said, no chance, not stashing him. I'm going to stash somebody that has more ceiling, especially, again, as the offensive line gets healthier. I think the running game for the Raiders might tick up a notch down the stretch. Now, before you covered the Raiders, you were on the Florida State beat for the Athletics. So I got a question for you about Cam Akers. A lot of fantasy players out there are frustrated that Cam Akers hasn't taken over the Rams backfield yet. Having watched him a lot, do you see Akers as an eventual 3-down back at the NFL level?
I do. I mean, he was pretty. When you look at his numbers, it doesn't necessarily jump off the page what he did at Florida State, but when you consider how bad that offensive line was, it's pretty incredible. I mean, I think it was his junior season or sophomore season where he got tackled. I think an average of almost like a yard behind the line of scrimmage, and he still had almost 1,000 yards or something crazy like that. And so, I think he has a total package. He's a nice compact back. He can catch. He can be a power runner. He's elusive. He's fast. I think he has all the tools that you would want out of a modern running back. But I think with the situation with the Rams, I mean, obviously they have multiple running backs with Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson. And he's a rookie, so, I got being a little bit frustrated that, he hasn't been as productive this season. But I think long term in the future, he would be somebody to keep an eye on as long as he can stay healthy. That's the big thing with Akers is he dealt with ankle injuries in college. And I know he's been banged up a little bit with the Rams this season, I believe. And so, that's the main thing. If he can stay healthy and stay on the field, I think eventually he could be that 3-down running back.
All right, I got one more question for you, Tashan. What's the best meal you've had since moving to Vegas? And I've only been there for a few months, but Vegas is a great food town. A lot of people go and they get stuck on the strip, but you start exploring the city. It's one of the best food cities I've actually ever been to because there's so much different cuisine out there. So what's the best meal you've had since moving out there?
Yeah, man, I moved here during a crazy time with it being the pandemic and everything. And so my first, month or two, I was eating out a lot just as I kind of got settled in my new apartment and everything. And it's tough to rank them, but I would have to say the the place I go to the most. It's not really like a sit down place, but there's this taco spot next to my crib called Moss Tacos. It's like authentic, like Mexican tacos. And I'm a taco guy. Like I just went to LA for the Chargers trip, and that's pretty much all I ate was tacos. And so that's probably been the best thing that I ate. I'm a big cooker too. I make my own stuff, but that's probably, that's been some top tier tacos that I found. Once I find that, I usually keep going back to it. But yeah, like you said, like in general, the stuff on the strip, not so much, because they usually gouge it on the strip. They jack up the prices because it's tourism and everything. But I live in Henderson. It's more so in the suburbs. And if you kind of explore a little bit, you can find some nice spots that are a little bit more affordable.
There used to be a taco shop right at the end of the strip, just past the Wynn. I'm blanking on the name of it right now. Tacos were like $2 a piece, and it was amazing. But I have not had Moss Tacos yet. That's on the list. I think my favorite place in Vegas, Lotus of Siam, the Thai place. It is incredible.
Yeah, I went to try to get that, but it was closed still because of the pandemic. Like I went there with my sister, and then I went back another time, and it was still closed. I don't know if it's changed now, but yeah, I heard that was like the best Thai place of all time or something like that. So I've been trying to give it a try.
It's a must visit every time I get there. Tashan, thanks for making some time for us this morning. Look forward to catching up with you again down the road.
No problem, man. Keep in touch.
It's Tashan Reed. He covers the Raiders for The Athletic. You can get all of his coverage along with our fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $1 a week at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Let's get to a few questions, and to answer those questions, we are going to bring back Michael Beller and Brandon Funston. Welcome back, gentlemen. We got a screenshot up here. Whoa. This is from Jason Frazier. West of downtown Cleveland, you can see some strong thunderstorms in the next hour. Severe thunderstorm warnings are in effect for places like Mansfield and Sandusky. Wind gusts could be up to 60 miles per hour. That's even worse than we were talking about earlier. So, I think we've already made the necessary adjustments in that matchup, but there's a Michael Salfino tweet with a nice chart in it. I would not play non-Adams players in Green Bay today. I think he's referring to pass catchers. You can leave Aaron Jones in your lineups as well. Be very worried. Probably play Watson, Fuller, Cooks. Pittsburgh seems okay. Here's the effect of wind on a thrown pass. Okay, so that's the chart in front of you. Yeah, it's bad. Like, it's really bad. So have you guys made any other adjustments to your lineup since the show started based on various weather concerns? I'll go to you first, Brandon.
Well, no, I already made those adjustments because I was apprised of this weather situation before that. So I would already started to adjust. I'll go back and make sure I haven't missed anything. But look at Cleveland. Baker Mayfield wasn't that trustworthy in perfect conditions. Yep. He very rarely, I think he's had 2 games over 219 passing yards, only 1 game where he's had more than 2 passing touchdowns. You get Nick Chubb back, and you can run all day on Houston. I expect Cleveland to do that. So I think Baker Mayfield could be one of the worst fantasy quarterbacks of the week. And Houston, you look at Will Fuller as a big play guy. You definitely would worry about him, and even Brandon Cooks. So, throwing to Duke Johnson, maybe even a Jordan Akins. We thought in Cleveland and the Raiders, that was a 1 touchdown game, and that very possible it could be if this wind ends up being as bad as it's kind of, threatening to be. We could see another one of those things play out.
How about you, Beller? What changes have you made in the last little while?
Yeah, I haven't really done anything. I'll actually give you a non-change that I made, and this is gonna ring familiar to you, Brandon, because we talked about Marvin Jones and how I am much lower on him than both you and Jake are, just in general, and certainly this week I've got him on my bench coming into this game in favor of DJ Chark, and I'm sticking with it. And it's more a commentary on Jones than it is on Chark, I suppose. But I'm just saying that I am not going to sit DJ Chark in this game because of weather concerns, just outright. I think that there's just too much volume for him. There are too many ways to get him involved. I understand where Salfino's going with that tweet that we threw up, and he absolutely could be right. We always have to leave room in our fantasy thinking for someone else against us being the right one. But I just think there are way too many ways to get DJ Chark involved, and they're going to need something other than James Robinson in this game if they're going to have any hope of sticking with the Packers. So I still like DJ Chark quite a bit in that game. I would play him. The other pass catchers in Jacksonville, Green Bay, that's where I would start to think twice.
I was going to interject. One thing that I did do while Teron was talking was I quickly added Kyle Rudolph in Scott Fishbowl. Irv Smith's been ruled out. This is another game in Chicago where it could be some weather. Kyle Rudolph had his best game of the season, I think, last week with the 40 yards. So if there's only one tight end in Minnesota, I'm a lot more interested than if it's the Rudolph Irv Smith combo.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, there's going to be opportunities there, and Rudolph is like a security blanket for Kirk Cousins, even when he shouldn't be. They seem to find ways to get him the ball. Let's get to a few questions here. We saw a defense question from Jorge. Ravens or Steelers defense this week? What do you think, Brandon?
Put those hands together. Either one. I think both of them are two of the best plays you could have this week. Honestly, Joe Burrow's a pretty smart guy. He's a pretty quick thinker, and I feel like if you're going to pressure Cam Newton, like, I don't know that even with Jacoby Myers stepping up, that he has the weapons that Joe Burrow does to kind of counteract that pressure. We saw it with Cam Newton. He plays the Jets. They get no pressure on the quarterback. And if he sits back in that pocket, he can look good. And Seattle was the same thing. Cam Newton had all day to throw. But when you put pressure on Cam, good things can happen for the defense. I think the Baltimore Ravens can do exactly that. And there's just not a lot of ways New England can hurt you, unlike with Cincinnati. So I will play the Ravens.
Got a question here from Sean. Based on all this Sean McVay mystery, pick 3 in a full PPR league. Christian Kirk, Sean has Kyler in that lineup. Woods, Chark, Fuller, who has the weather concerns, and DeAndre Swift. So which 3 do you like there, Beller?
Woods is easily in there for me. Don't even think it's really a question there. So he's in the lineup. So I'm really looking at 2 between Kirk, Chark, Fuller, and DeAndre Swift. I'm going to ride with DeAndre Swift as one of my answers here. Just been getting a little bit more work every single week as time goes by. Gets a little more, and I think that's still going to accrue to his benefit this week. The receivers are very tough. I want to say Fuller, but I just think that weather is really going to be tough on that entire game, so I'm staying away from that game. I will go ever so slightly with Christian Kirk ahead of DJ Chark, but I think both those guys are going to be fine plays here today.
The CFC fan is living this nightmare every week. I think this has come in before, at least from him or one of the other listeners out there. Justin Herbert or Lamar Jackson. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have been sticking with Jackson. I think it's become really close. Which side of that are you on, Brandon?
Yeah, my rankings, I think Herbert 6 and Lamar Jackson 7. So really, I think this is going to be a good matchup for both of them. New England's defense, not what we saw the last couple of years. You can run on them. You can throw on them a little bit as well. So I think Lamar Jackson ends up with having a decent day overall. But Herbert's been money every week. And I know this Miami defense is ascending, but they've been more big play in fantasy. I think you can still move the ball against him. And Justin Herbert's a guy that got the big arm. He can hurt you on any spot on the field with the passing game. So for me, I'm going to go Justin Herbert.
It's a good problem to have, as we often say with situations.
I actually think it's a bad problem to have. Like, who wants
to make a
horrible
decision to have to make? Yeah,
I mean,
every
your
week.
Your floor is like 20 points from both of them, though. Like,
but if you feel good about Justin Herbert being consistent like that, I would look. I mean, if Lamar Jackson has a good game, I would trade him immediately. Although he's got a great playoff schedule.
I was going to say he's got the great playoff schedule, so maybe you
trade one
Herbert,
of them.
I would trade whichever one I could get more for.
Yep.
Bottom line.
That's a good call. Yep.
Yeah, especially if you're already on track for the playoffs. If you're kind of grinding it out, maybe you don't have that luxury. But if you're sitting in a good position right now, deal away some of that depth and get a boost somewhere else in your lineup. Let's talk about a few players we like for Jock Market this week. Be sure to go to the App Store and get the app now. Android app coming soon. You can start making money this week. Beller, we're always looking for players who exceed expectations relative to their weekly projections. Everything looks really good for this Cleveland backfield in Week 10, especially with the weather concerns in that matchup against the Texans.
I mean, I just want every single piece of Nick Chubb that I can get this week. Nick Chubb, every step along the way. We can even go back to Georgia. This guy is underappreciated for what he brings to a running game and to an offense, and it's been true in Cleveland. Everyone wants to write him off for Kareem Hunt. Everyone wants to say, oh, Kareem Hunt's going to eat into the workload too much, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? You're half right there. Kareem Hunt has eaten into the receiving upside for Nick Chubb. And what has it resulted in this season? 10 carries for 60 yards in a game they lost by 32 points in Week 1. 22 carries for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns in Week 2. 19 carries for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 3. Week 4, when he hurt his knee, he already had 43 yards on 6 carries. He was going to put up another monster game. Do we want our running backs to be getting receptions? Of course we do. That goes without saying. But you know what? If Nick Chubb's going to get himself 20 touches and be putting up 5 yards per touch, which go back and look at Nick Chubb last year. Go back and look at Nick Chubb when he broke through with Cleveland. Go back and look at Nick Chubb at Georgia. That's pretty much what we can expect from him every single week. I am fine if he only gets 1 or 2 looks in the passing game because he is going to chew defenses up on the ground. Full workload for him. He's been out since early October. No reason to expect that knee is not at 100%. Love, love, love Nick Chubb today.
Let's talk about this Bills-Cardinals matchup. 2 players that you like there. One, not that surprising. The second one, though, is a guy that I have not heard much about this week, even though this matchup is one that people really like.
Let's start with the not-so-surprising one, Kyler Murray. I mean, this guy's floor, this guy's fantasy floor, and this is not an exaggeration, his floor, his lowest score of the season is Aaron Rodgers' average of the season. And we're talking about Aaron Rodgers, as we should be, in the MVP discussion. Kyler Murray also in that MVP discussion. I don't think there's any reason to expect this Bills-Cardinals game to surprise us and be a 24-17 game. I think we're getting 37-34, 41-37, something along those lines. Both offenses absolutely going to show out in this one. And Kyler Murray, I mean, when does this guy not show out? Love what we've seen from him. And again, like you said, Derek, it's not just about finding cheap guys on Jock Market. It's about finding guys who are going to exceed expectations. And I don't know how high you would have to set Kyler Murray's expectations for me to think that he's not going to exceed them. Give me everything I can get on Kyler Murray. And then John Brown. I mean, John Brown is another guy who benefits from having a true number 1 out there in Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs draws so much attention from opposing defenses, as he should, and that is going to be the case again today. Whether Patrick Peterson shadows him or not, and Patrick Peterson isn't someone we think of, like a Jalen Ramsey or a Jair Alexander, a good but not great corner. But either whether he shadows him or not, he's going to draw more coverage on Stephon Diggs than he is on John Brown. And one thing we loved about John Brown after Buffalo made the trade for Stephon Diggs is that he gets to slide back into a more natural role for him, going up against number 2 corners, going up against safeties in coverage. Last year, this team asked him to be the number 1 receiver, and he did a fine job, but that's really just not what John Brown is. We saw last week he comes back from the injury in a great matchup against Seattle, in a high-scoring game, 11 targets, caught 8 of them, 99 yards. This script could be exactly the same with maybe a slightly better defense, but still just as much offense as we saw a week ago from the Buffalo Bills. So John Brown is one of those guys who does fall more into that former bucket, a guy who I think is just flat out underpriced and is going to exceed those expectations.
It makes a lot of sense on Jock Market, makes a lot of sense in tournament builds as well. If you want exposure to that Buffalo passing game without paying top dollar for Stephon Diggs, John Brown can get it there for you. Let's talk about the Green Bay-Jacksonville matchup. Everybody loves Aaron Jones this week for good reason. I think Devontae Adams, we talked about earlier, maybe a little less impacted by the windy conditions than receivers who do more downfield. But the running back on the other side in Jacksonville is a guy that you really like. What do you like about James Robinson this week?
James Robinson handles everything for this Jacksonville offense. One of 4 running backs in the NFL who have at least 40% of their team's touches, and I don't see any reason why that's going to change this week or really any week. So the weather is nice for him. I actually think that there's an argument to be made that the weather could be a bad thing for him. You would think naturally it would be good just because run. But if this game gets uglier than it's already expected to be with Green Bay being nearly 2 touchdown favorites against Jacksonville, that could just be bad for the Jacksonville offense as a whole. But I still think that we can get a whole lot of work for James Robinson in this game. And what you like about him, like any workhorse running back, game script proof. This guy handles so much of the passing game load in Jacksonville that we don't really care too much if this game gets entirely out of hand. So I think you have an answer for every single potential question along the way for James Robinson. And I do think that we see another big game out of him, another huge usage game, and people are being scared away because of the spread, because of the weather. You're going to be able to get in on James Robinson for a little bit cheaper than you would expect, a cheaper IPO price than I've seen over the last few weeks for him on Jock Market, and that definitely makes me want to get involved in a guy who could easily surpass 25 touches in this game.
Now, the last player we're going to talk about in this segment is a player that you and I both like. He's in that Tampa Bay offense. Who do you like for the Bucs this week?
I just think Chris Godwin's going to be the best player in that offense going forward. I think he is the best fit for what Tom Brady's skill set is right now, and I think he's the one guy whose target share we can lock in every single week. I don't think we're going to see really anyone be a consistent double-digit target guy just because of how many diverse options they have in the passing game, but I do think that Chris Godwin is going to be the 8 target per game guy, and maybe Antonio Brown will pop up with 12, and maybe Mike Evans will pop up with a little bit more touchdown upside, but the one guy who has the very consistent floor and still brings ceiling to the table is Chris Godwin, and he is just falling down no matter where you want to look, whether you're looking in Jock Market, whether you're looking on DFS, whether you're looking at his receiving yards prop. You are getting really historic lows for Chris Godwin compared with where he was last season and early this season because of his injuries, because of the addition of Antonio Brown, because of the ugly performance from Tampa Bay's offense. Really, no one wants to buy in on Chris Godwin. That is the greatest time to buy in on not just a good player, but a truly great player in this Tampa Bay offense. This feels like a get-right spot, a bounce-back spot for Tampa Bay after a tough loss to New Orleans, getting a softer opponent in Carolina. Every single thing lines up for Tampa Bay's offense to bounce back, and if that's the case, I want to bet on the guy who I think is the best receiver in that offense, and that is Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I just think he's the clear-cut number one. It could be 1A, 1B with Antonio Brown, but Chris Godwin just overlooked kind of around the industry right now, relatively speaking. He's obviously in season-long lineups, but I think he's a great tournament play and a great target on Jock Market as well. Be sure to take control of your fantasy sports experience and download Jock Market now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. Let's move on to our Survivor segment. First question, Beller, Brandon, are you guys still alive in your respective Survivor pools? We'll go to you first, Brandon.
I'm not doing a Survivor pool, so I'll say yes, I would be if I was.
All right, well, even though you're not in a pool, who would you be choosing here in Week 10 if you were trying to advance to Week 11?
I'm trying to think if I would have used Green Bay before. I'm not sure. If I had Green Bay still on the table, I would definitely use them. And if not Green Bay, then it's New Orleans. And frankly, this is one of those weeks outside of those two teams, I can argue both ways on every other game with the maybe exception of New England beating Baltimore.
Yeah, that seems pretty far-fetched. What do you think about this week's matchups, Beller? Who do you like from a Survivor perspective?
Yeah, if we're going beyond the obvious plays, which a lot of people are going to have to do, right? Week 10, and most Survivor pools I play in are asking you to make 2 picks at this stage of the game. I really like the Raiders. I just love what we've seen from that offense, and I still feel like they're not getting enough credit for their wins. This is a team that beat Kansas City. This is a team that beat the New Orleans Saints. I mean, the sun is shining in from my window almost as though it is blessing this pick. It's been cloudy all morning here in Chicago, and suddenly I make this Raiders call, and the sun just opens up. The clouds part. The sun shines in. That's what it's going to be doing on this Raiders team today. Let's start giving them credit. This is not just a team that has the record it has. It has some huge wins. And they really are looking like a much different team than we saw last year. And even last year, remember, guys, they went on that like 3 or 4 game win streak in midseason. It pushed them to like 6-4, and we were saying this is a sneaky Raiders team. Maybe they're going to get into the playoffs. They ended the season at 8-8. It didn't happen for them, but this is not some team that came out of nowhere this season. Lampoon the John Gruden hire all you will. Things have gone very well for this Raiders team, and I don't think anyone's lampooning it any longer. You can make fun of the length of the contract, the dollars on the contract, but John Gruden has really turned that team around in short order, and with the wins they've had, playing at home, the offense rounding into shape, I think they control the game against Denver. I think they're one of the better plays on the board this week.
Yeah, I think at this point I need to take the L on Gruden because I made fun of the Raiders for a very long time for that decision, and it looks like I have been very wrong about what he's been able to do, especially with Derek Carr. I didn't think it was going to happen with Derek Carr. I think that's something that makes this extra impressive. We got some news here from the Lions backfield. DeAndre Swift is starting today for the Lions. It kind of seems like he's getting a little bit of separation from Adrian Peterson there. Nice matchup against the Washington Footballs, just in terms of volume. It's not like Washington gives up a ton of points or anything like that, but if you get Swift 18, 20 touches maybe against that Washington defense, I could see him putting up a pretty good line today. This is a great slate because we have balance between early games and late games. Love that. Red Zone's going to be great for 6.5 hours today instead of 3 hours, which is always nice. And on top of that, we get Tua versus Justin Herbert, you guys. Yeah. That's a great matchup. So Just thinking about those two guys straight up, who do you like better for this week from a fantasy perspective between Tua and Herbert? We'll go to you first, Beller.
Got to go Justin Herbert. I mean, Justin Herbert's just giving it to us week after week after week after week. Go look at the game logs. You can't find a bad game. And you've seen him do it against good defenses, too. We need to face up to the fact that Justin Herbert is looking like already a slam dunk pick for the Los Angeles Chargers. I love Tua Tagovailoa. I am starting him in a league. I am starting him over Drew Lock and Baker Mayfield as a QB2 in a super flex league. And I feel great about starting him. But let's just look at what Justin Herbert has done and honor it and tip our cap. I don't see how you go against Justin Herbert in this one, and that is nothing about Tua, everything about what Justin Herbert has given us and given the Chargers this season.
Yeah, I mean, Herbert's averaging over 300 passing yards. He can also run. He's been over 20 rushing yards 3 straight games. One of those games was a 60-yard rushing game. He's rushed for a couple touchdowns. I mean, he's doing everything. And if you compare the weapons, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, and guys like Jalen Guyton and Randos that are just, scoring big plays for Herbert every week. And then you look at Miami, who's down Preston Williams. They might have to bring out Antonio Callaway as their number 2 receiver this week. Gesicki's been spotty, but yeah, I just think from a weapon standpoint, from a consistency standpoint, and just having, cut his teeth for a little bit longer and been very successful doing that, you got to go Justin Herbert.
Yeah, you mentioned Devontae Parker a little bit earlier, though. I do like Parker this week. I think he can kind of bring some of the ceiling he was bringing week in and week out last season now that Tua has taken over. We've got another screenshot to share with everybody. This one's from David Payne Purdom. Games with lopsided betting totals. 95% of the money on the over in Bucks Panthers, 93% on the over of Eagles Giants, 89% on the over in Bills Cardinals, 87% on the over in Ravens Patriots, and 84% of the money on the under in Bengals Steelers. Interesting because with all the weather concerns, the Bengals Steelers weather concerns looked to be about as bad as Browns Texans and Packers Jags, but the line did not move. The over-under number did not move nearly as much in that game. So it's interesting that the betting public is all over that. We've got one more question before we sign off. This one comes from Montana Loose Cannon. You guys got to get this one right. Yep, a lot riding on this one. Deontay Johnson, Curtis Samuel, or Devontae Parker in a half PPR league. Where do you go on that one, Brandon?
I'm actually going to go Devontae Parker, like you said. I just think he's going to have a huge target load in this game. You look at Curtis Samuel, that's a tough matchup against Tampa. And Deontay Johnson, there's weather concerns there as well as early exit concerns every week with Deontay Johnson. So for me, I think this is volume-based. I'm going to go Devontae Parker.
Do we have agreement there, Beller?
Slam dunk, Loose Cannon. Devontae Parker is the way to go here. If I was going to make an argument for anyone else, it would be Deontay Johnson, and that would just be based on the fact that Pittsburgh should be able to get things cooking against Cincinnati, and you like the fact that over-under hasn't moved, as DVR just said, so you feel decent about it. But Devontae Parker, clearly the number one option in the passing game, in another game that we expect to be able to put some points on the board with the Dolphins and the Chargers going. Just feels like he could be getting back to the wide receiver one he was last season. Remember, it was after Preston Williams was out last season that Devontae Parker really took off and became that wide receiver one. Preston Williams out again. Feels like things are starting to line up for Devontae Parker to deliver on that wide receiver one, high-end wide receiver two draft value that you had to take him in back in August.
Yeah, make it 3 for 3. I'm on Parker as well, but like I said earlier, I've been wrong about the Steelers receivers and the pecking order there pretty much at every turn this season, but feeling pretty good about Devontae Parker. Gentlemen, I hope you enjoy Week 10. We'll look forward to doing this again with you next Sunday.
Sounds good.
You too, Derek.
Best of luck.
Best of luck to you guys as well. That is going to wrap things up for our Week 10 episode of the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by JockMarket. Take control of your fantasy sports experience and download JockMarket now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. Also, be sure to get all of our written fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $1 a week at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. For Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, Michael Beller, Ed Mallion, Tashan Reed, and our man behind the scenes, Nando DeFino, I'm Derek Van Riper. Thanks for watching. Good luck in Week 10.